Trump. How the upper lesser deals with challenge fuel. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained in comprehensive terms why Donald Trump is a narcissist. It's not really a surprise. Many politicians are. The reason being is that politics proves particularly attractive to narcissists for the purposes of the pursuit of the prime aims. Political power, which can lead to governmental and military power, enables a narcissist to assert control over millions, hundreds of millions, potentially billions of people. It allows the gathering of massive amounts of fuel. It allows access to lots of different people to allow the acquisition of character traits, and it provides access to a whole host of residual benefits. Money, access to confidential information, networks, facade management, and so forth. It is little wonder that so many narcissists flock to the political arena, and as a consequence of that attraction, it also means that invariably, in order to succeed, you need to be a narcissist to deal with the environment that's created by having lots of narcissists come together. There are non-narcissists that do succeed, but invariably it is the narcissist that finds themselves getting into those positions of power and getting to the top jobs. Donald Trump is one such individual, and there's a host of evidence that supports his narcissism. What is the situation for Trump when it comes to dealing with challenge fuel? For, given the nature of the position that he holds, there's always going to be somebody that will disagree with him, whether they do so with legitimate reasons or not. When you hold the position of being President of the United States, or the leader of any country, or a high-up political position, you're going to have people who will disagree with you, and often vehemently. As you would expect, and as I've explained elsewhere, that when it comes to a narcissist receiving challenge fuel, the narcissism relies upon one of the three assertions of control to deal with it, because challenge fuel amounts to a threat to control. If you've not watched my video about challenge fuel already, I would encourage you to do so. Accordingly, on an individual basis, if Donald Trump was to face somebody issuing challenge fuel to him on a one-on-one basis, then his narcissism would utilize one of the three assertions of control to deal with it. But I'm not going to be exploring that in this particular video. Instead, I'm going to be looking at the situation which is less likely to be found in your world, where you're more likely to have a one-on-one with the narcissist, but there is a situation where a narcissist faces the mass provision of challenge fuel. How does the narcissist deal with a situation, for instance, where the press are criticizing them left, right, and center? All of that is challenge fuel. How does the narcissist deal with people criticizing the narcissist on social media, assuming the narcissist sees this? How does the narcissist deal with protests against them? How does the narcissist deal with commentary across various outlets with regard to their behaviors? How do they deal with people perhaps barracking them in the streets? When you hold political power, it goes with the territory that you're going to face criticism of some degree, and often by way of mass comment or mass protest. With Donald Trump, divisive figure that he is, he has faced his own share of a considerable numbers of controversies and scandals. Irrespective of whether you believe these are legitimate or not, that is not the point of this video. The fact is that these scandals existed. For instance, the scandal involving Stormy Daniels, the investigation into his handling of government documents, the investigation of the Trump Organization, the furore around his tax returns, the fake election allegations, the involvement in relation to the January 6th storming of the Capitol, and, more recently, the mayhem that has been generated as a consequence of Trump's tariff war, with the consequential impact upon US bonds and stock markets around the world, with the commentary that follows from therein. Much of that commentary was hostile. Much of it was critical, and therefore was the provision of challenge fuel. But how does a narcissist, who is an upper lesser type B, as Donald Trump is, deal with this mass provision of challenge fuel? Does he relish it? Does it cause him to scurry away to a bunker and suck on his thumb whilst ordering a McDonald's? Does it cause him to lash out at those around him, blaming them? Well, first of all, Trump is categorized as what is known as a highly provocative narcissist. In other words, he thrives on shithousery. He relishes lobbing hand grenades, metaphorically, of course, so that it generates the furore, the mass response, be it of those that support him and say that he's doing a good thing. That's not an issue, because that's pure positive fuel. There's no threat to his control in that, but he still wants that, of course, and that's part of the reason why he embraces chaos in the way that he does. But also, all of the individuals whose noses have been put out of joint, who are lambasting him in the press and across social media, who are taking to the streets with their hands-off protests with regard to the handling of redundancies and cost-cutting, the comments in newspapers by opinion writers and those writing the leader columns in relation to the stock market changes caused by his tariff war, all of those things are challenge fuel because they're criticizing him and it threatens his need for control. But, to put it bluntly, he loves it because he's a highly provocative narcissist. A smaller scale comparison would be of a footballer who scores a goal to put his team 3-2 in the lead after being behind 2-0. And he runs in front of the away fans, and he cups his ears or he makes a sign towards them which winds them up. And he's met with chantings of wanker, wanker, and various gesticulations and cause to question his parentage. But he's lapping it up because it's all fuel. Yes, it's a criticism by virtue of the name calling, but that highly provocative narcissist, just like the way that Trump is, absolutely loves it because it tells him that it matters, that Trump loves to get under people's skin. He loves to stick it to his opponents. Because he doesn't operate a facade, what you see is what you get. You may recall the exchange that he had with, I think it was the senator for Maine, who refused to go along with what he was doing in relation to gender. And quite simply, there was an exchange where she said something about, see you in court to Trump. This was challenge fuel, and he lapped it up. It was in a public place, and he simply said, great, look forward to that. That'll be a real easy one. He dealt with her directly, in effect, dismissing her. It didn't trouble him. It didn't worry him. He doesn't do worried. In part, that's why he's seen as a strong leader, because he makes decisions and he has that total self-belief that he is right. When he receives mass challenge fuel, naturally he can't deal with it head on. But he doesn't need to. First of all, mass challenge fuel is actually embraced by Trump because he actively engages in shithousery by virtue of the style of his narcissism. As an upper lesser type B narcissist, as being bold and brash and belligerent, he is in your face. I'm not backing down. I'm telling you the way that it is. And that naturally winds certain people up, which is what he wants, because then they are provoked to react and they give him lashings of fuel. But do not lose sight of the fact it is still challenge fuel, which means it carries with it a difficulty for Trump. Whilst he embraces the fuel perhaps more than other types of narcissist by virtue of his further categorization as being highly provocative, he still has to address the issue of control because that's one of the prime aims. Thus, his narcissism gears him up to provoke people in the way that he has, because the ensuing chaos in terms of the reactions of political leaders, the press, the media, Joe Public, all gives him massive amounts of fuel from a variety of different sources. He's loving it. But it's still challenge fuel, and he therefore needs to get that control. He can't do it directly. He can't make a mass announcement that will affect everybody or cause them all to back down as a consequence of said massive announcement. He's not going to be able to interact with the billions of people that have responded to his antagonism and provocation individually. That's simply impossible. It isn't Trump's style to invariably then go and complain to somebody else about the way that he's been treated. Whilst an upper lesser type B can use pity plays, they're not something that is utilised often at all by Donald Trump. Instead, he essentially uses dismissiveness by going to a position of withdrawal. I don't mean that he throws his rattle out of the pram and storms off. That's contrary to the way that he deals with things. He actually stands his ground. He doesn't have a mid-ranger strop and throw the rattle out of the pram and storm out of the room. Instead, he simply dismisses people. You're wrong. See you in court. Fake news. And therefore, the way that he deals with massive challenge fuel is simply to adopt the position of he is right, everybody else is wrong. Remember, as a narcissist, he doesn't have the self-reflection whereby he would say to himself, hang on a minute, have I made the right decision here? If millions upon millions of people are calling me out with regard to what I have done, perhaps I have made a boo-boo? That never enters Trump's head. He is always right. He is always the expert. He knows more than anyone else. And that grandiosity, coupled with his belligerence, means that when he's faced with massive amounts of challenge fuel, his simple response is goody gumdrops, loving all of this fuel, enjoying all the shithousery, but, and remember this is going on subconsciously, I must get that control, and he does so by dismissal. He basically withdraws by telling people they are wrong and he is right, and therefore it's dealt with. That is how he then gains control. Accordingly, challenge fuel is something that's very much welcomed by Donald Trump because of his provocative nature. He relishes the chaos that is caused by his pronunciations, by the tariff announcement, his Liberation Day, the changes that follow thereafter, him telling people it's a good day to go and buy stock. But remember, his narcissism still must gain that control, and it does, by way of his haughtiness and his dismissiveness. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.